right. What's up, my friends? We're back live with AP World. We're going to talk about both world wars tonight. Two world wars in 1 hour, and all the time for your questions, everything you need. So I'm sharing the slides with you tonight. We're thinking about making the slides something that we share every week. Not sure yet, but possibly. So tonight we're going to share the slides with you, see how many people use them. We'll see what we do. I want to quickly just give you a quick rundown of what you're doing, what this is, how this works, so you know what to expect. So I'm Amanda. I'm a AP World teacher, and I'm the founder of Fiveable. I started this last year, and now we're kicking it up for this season of AP exams. I'm super excited to be studying with all of you guys and helping you guys pass. I love AP World History, and even more so, I love helping you get college credit, because I didn't take a lot of APs in college or in high school, and so I'm paying for that now. And so I want to help you guys get those credits before you have to pay for them, because it sucks. So you don't need to be doing that. So this is, Fiveable. Every time we're live, it's free. We have streams every week, every Monday night at 8 p.m. You can catch an AP World stream. We're also going to be adding... That's awesome. We're also going to be adding a second AP World stream every week on Thursdays, and that's going to be something that's going to be hosted by students. So looking forward to that. This week we'll do a little bit of a Period 5 review. So let me ask you really quick in the chat, and I'm going to give you an update on the apps and everything in a second. But in the chat, let me know, what are you studying right now in AP World? And don't tell me the chapter, because I don't know the chapter is memorized. Tell me the content. What is it that you guys are doing in class this week? Okay, so you guys answer that. So quick updates. Our trivia app is ready. We're beta testing it right now. And so actually, if you shoot me an email at hi@fiveable.me, or you can find the email at the bottom of the page. Shoot me an email. I'll give you guys beta testing links so you guys can test that out and help us, which is really useful for us to get a lot of feedback. And then we're going to be able to launch the app on mobile, on iOS, on Android, everything, hopefully next week, if not the week after. So it's ready to go. We're just testing it out, making sure that things are working, they all make sense. And so we got to get other people looking at it. And, keep in mind, so the app, while it's live, trivia while it's live is free. Streams while we're live are free. If you want to go back and rewatch any of the streams we've done, we've been live every single week this school year, plus all of this stuff from last year is also uploaded, all of the full sessions I did on all the periods. So if you want access to that, you can join Fiveable Plus. In the month of March, it's $10 off. So you can join for, $25? And you get all the subjects. So it's not just AP World. You can come and watch every stream, everything. And we'll be live in May for only Fiveable Plus members. So remember, these streams are free up until the week of the exam. And then we're going to be doing cram sessions to really just support the Plus members that are supporting us. All right, so you can sign up for the beta. All right, so the beta link, if you want the beta app and you want to download this for us in iOS and Android, or you want to test it out on the web app, you can do that. Just shoot me an email, and I'll just respond to all these later. Shoot me an email at hi@fiveable.me, and I'll hook you up with the links and stuff so you can test that out. And we really just want to hear your feedback. So that's the biggest thing. All right. So if you haven't been to a live stream before, you can put anything in the chat. It's really for you guys to talk to each other, help each other out. You can talk to me in it too. Of course, I can see it. But sometimes while I'm teaching, it's a little hard to keep up with. So if you have a question that you definitely want to make sure that I answer, put it in the question parking lot. Looks like a lot of you guys are already doing that. And even answering each other's questions, that's super helpful. If you want to look and see if you can answer any of those, it helps me out so that we can make sure to just get them all answered. All right, so the goal here is I'm putting both world wars together, but I want you to go away from this session feeling really confident about this content. All right, so it looks like you guys are really all over the place in where you're at. Some of you guys are finishing up period 5. Some of you guys are just starting period 6. Looks like a few of you guys might be a little far behind. No worries, you're still okay. I would recommend, yeah, if you're still in period 3, it's time to start reading ahead. That would be my suggestion to you. Um, if you're still in period 3 or period 4. But period 5, you're totally good. And yeah. All right. So we're putting, so tonight I'm going to be talking about both world wars because they're really far more similar than they are different. And when it comes to AP World, this is not like a history of like military history, you know? It's not, you're not going to need to know the battles in any war, really, in any time in history. Like there are some battles that are of course important, and you could do a whole, you could really dive into military history, but AP World just isn't that. It's a lot more of like big patterns of causes and effects. So really what I'm just totally going to focus on tonight is cause and effect of both world wars. And we'll talk a little bit about like key things to know during the war, because there are some like key terms that you should know, things you should be able to describe. But you're not going to just be straight up asked like what happened in this battle. Like that's just never going to happen. So if you are someone who just knows a lot about one of these wars, awesome. That will help you out. It will always help you to know stuff. But if you're going to don't feel bad if other people just know a ton about this. These just tend to be topics that you studied before. They're super interesting. Things that go boom, everyone loves that, right? We want to learn more about stuff that is big and explosive. Right. So this is going to be very like, it's going to be collaborative, right? Because I know you guys know a lot about this stuff and you've learned about it before, or you're doing it right now. And just make sure that, tell us what you know. We can share knowledge in here for sure. All right. So I am going to share my screen. It looks like a lot of you guys are in the slide. So if you haven't already, you can just follow along. Just click that little green button right there and follow along with the slides. And if you want, you can make a copy of it and edit it out on your own if you'd like. All right. So let's see. Let me share my screen. Chrome tab. So let me tell you, if you can take notes tonight, you should take notes because it's always useful to, hang on. It's always useful for you to like, oh my God, my screen is doing a crazy thing. There we go. It's always useful to just like write things down, to engage with it, like you have the slide, so obviously don't feel like you have to write anything down, and it's not for a grade, so you don't have to. But it's useful, write things down, especially things that like maybe were new for you or really good ways to remember something and you want to go back to it. Okay. Actually, hang on. Okay, let me hide that, exit that. One more time. All right. All right, we're going to jump in. Okay, so remember, put your questions in the questions parking lot. Use the chat as you need to. And I'll ask questions as we go. So the world wars, also shameless plug, if you're not following us on social media, definitely follow @ThinkFiveable. Sometimes we give away free, Fiveable Plus memberships, and we always are posting useful things, especially on YouTube, you guys. YouTube is where I have the most AP World videos. Okay, so I'm doing period 6 out of order, unlike how I did period 5. However, whoops. Here's why. Period 6, the key concepts are basically like 6.1 is all the like science and technology in the 20th century, right? So like all the new weapons and medications and all that kind of stuff goes in there. 6.2 is all about global conflict, including the wars, including the Cold War, decolonization, all this stuff. 6.3 is all about like economics and globalization. So we're going to kind of weave in and out, but I first want to lay it out of like what happened in the world wars, how did it happen, and what did that lead to? Okay, so first, of course, we're starting with World War I. So World War I has an immediate cause. So here's this nice little like, GIF of exactly what happened. Where basically you have the oh my God, the Archduke. Here I am, like blanking. The Archduke of Austria-Hungary, Franz Ferdinand, just like the band, who is assassinated by Gavrilo Princip, who is a member of the Serbian national like terrorist group, basically called the Black Hand. Right. So they assassinate the Archduke and his wife. It's a crazy story. Like if you have time and you find this interesting, just Google like how a sandwich started World War One. It's pretty insane because there was a bunch of people that were set out to assassinate this guy, and it was like a series of unfortunate events. The one that actually did it didn't even think he was going to be in the right place at the right time. There was a change in direction. There were failed attempts. It was just like a crazy day. But this all happened in Sarajevo. So the Archduke is assassinated, and this like sets it off. Like, here we go. Now World War One is happening. But of course, like there are other causes, right? This didn't happen in isolation. There were a lot of factors that led to this. So let's go through the causes, and we're going to take a little bit of time to do this. Confused of who this person. So he's like the ruler, or he was about to be the ruler of Austria-Hungary, right? So he's the Archduke. So he's assassinated. Okay, so Austria-Hungary, it's the Serbians that do it. But here are the like real causes, the root of the problem. Like, why do we get World War One, aka the Great War, right? They call it the Great War because they didn't know there would be a second one. But it was pretty intense then. So something to remember, you can memorize these causes because it's literally Main, M-A-I-N. And they're the exact same causes of World War II. It's the same stuff, right? So in the time before World War One, you've got this rise of militarism. Okay, so in this, I have a little graph here. It's a little bit blurry, but it gets the job done. You can basically see an increase in spending on armaments, on weapons, in the time 1872 to 1912. Right? I mean, look, this is a percent increase. Germany increased their spending on weapons, on defense, on military by almost 350% in that time. So if one person's doing it, everyone's got to do it, right? You don't want to be the one left behind. If, my neighbors are stocking up weapons, I don't know why. I don't know what they're about to use it for, but I got to make sure that I have weapons too, right? And so that's exactly what starts to happen. It's all like a result of industrialization, right? It's like, we can build it, so we will. So everyone's forced to do the same thing. And now that we have these stockpiles, now that everybody has weapons, it's really easy to trigger it, right? I've got them. And so if we're going to start a war, it's going to be easy to just like jump into it because we have all those things. All right. So militarism is the first one. The second one, right, the A, would be alliances. So the thing about alliances is like, they're good because they keep you, protected. You have people that have your back, but they're bad because you can get really thrown into a conflict that you had nothing to do with. Right. So in this case, there's really two major alliances in Europe at this time. Right. So you've got the pink ones on the map. That would be your Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Ottoman, Bulgaria. And then you've got the Triple Entente, who become the allies, Russia, Great Britain, France, all the other ones as well. The US will join them. And so because of this assassination, where Austria-Hungary is essentially attacked by Serbia, all of a sudden these other countries have to join, right? So now Germany's got to jump in and defend Austria-Hungary. Now Turkey's got to jump in. And now because Germany's in, now France is going to declare war on Germany, right? So it just happens really fast. I mean, think about the best way to think of it, like we tweeted this out today of like World War One as a bar fight. But if you just think about, I don't know, if fights happen at your school, they used to happen at the school that I taught at all the time. And you can kind of see this play out in real life, right? If someone's going to mess with your friend, you might jump in and have your friend's back. You might not even know what the fight was about, it doesn't matter, right? This is my friend. I'm with them, right? This is my ride or die, so I'm doing this. But now I'm in this fight and I didn't even know what happened. All right. And then it's the same thing. It's gonna like bounce around just like that. Right. And now all of a sudden what started as like, some beef between two people all of a sudden includes I don't even know how many people, right? Oops, looks like. All right, so that's exactly how that worked. Oh, and yeah, we have some neutral powers as well. Okay, so alliances. Like today, we try to prevent that. We still have alliances, of course, but we try to prevent this from starting a war by instead of like having like secret alliances and really easy like triggers into like conflict, we have more like supranational organizations, right? Like the EU, like NATO, things like that. All right, I really like this map. It's just like really pretty. So what imperialism? Imperialism is a cause for World War I, right? We know that, as most of you guys are studying, it's going to pick up at the end of the 19th century, right? With the scramble for Africa. I mean, look at Africa on this map, just totally carved up, right? Everybody's got a piece. You can kind of see who has what. But the reason why this is a cause of World War I is because first, there's competition in those imperial, powers, and they're just as much as they're competing for land in Africa, they're competing for power in Europe. But also it becomes a global war because of these colonies, because of the empires, right? So like Australia and New Zealand have a big role in World War I because they're colonies of Great Britain. Otherwise, they would have nothing to do with it, right? A lot of these other countries in Africa, like everyone got involved. Everyone had a part in this because of their imperial powers. So, one movie that you could watch about World War I is called Gallipoli. It's like a movie from like the 80s, and Mel Gibson is in it. He's super young, but it's really good. It shows like what Australian soldiers' life was like in World War I, fighting in Turkey, in Gallipoli. So this is another cause, right? A third major cause. Like think of this all as like the context, right? Like this is all like swirling around. So once, Franz Ferdinand is assassinated, like that's it. It's just gonna it's all gonna pop up after that. Okay, and then a last cause was nationalism, right? So you've got nationalism that is, really increasing in the 19th century there, and for a lot of reasons. I mean, you have things like German unification, Italian unification, which you don't need to know super in depth for AP World. If you're in AP Euro, yes, like those are much more detailed. But here it's just like, you have a reorganization of states because of a national identity, right? We speak German, therefore we should create a state, a nation state that encompasses the German culture. And so you have this unification that is a result of a war. And then you have places that are like multi-ethnic states, right? This is the Austria-Hungarian Empire, right? So you've got, a lot of different cultures, different languages, different histories within this one state. But in a world where there's nationalism, where people want to defend themselves, to be in charge of themselves, and to be the best, they're going to want to separate from that. And they're going to get into like arguments around that. So, and another piece of it too is just like that fight to just like be the best, right? Like it, there's a difference between nationalism and patriotism. Or patriotism is, I love my country. I want to sing the national anthem. I'm patriotic, like I represent where I'm from. But nationalism is once you start to think, I love where I'm from because we're better than everybody else. That's a difference. That line of thinking is where nationalism can get really dangerous, because it leads to conflict like this, right? So instead of, like almost like friendly back and forth, like rivalries, it becomes really intense, and it's like you end up like fighting for yourself, your life, because of it. So these are your causes of World War One. I definitely recommend memorizing these causes. This kind of stuff comes up, if you can easily get a causation essay about the causes of World War One. This would be a great essay. All right. Okay, so the war itself. So what's crazy about the world wars in AP World is it's literally just like the causes, and then you kind of skip the war, and then it's the effects. So I'm not going to even talk too much. Like, you notice there's no battles listed here. We're not going to talk about any of the like military strategy. You don't need it for this. Super interesting. Read about it if you're interested in it. But here's what you have to know about the actual war. This is really the first total war, meaning that it will encompass everyone. Everyone's involved, right? Everyone has a role in this war, whether it's mobilizing, like, signing up to go fight in the war, or mobilizing resources, right? Everyone's starting to work in factories, in production of war goods, in saving like food and stuff like that, like making sure that the soldiers have what they need. So everybody's mobilizing. There's a massive use of propaganda. So like, here's an example. This picture is propaganda, right? It's the government trying to get people to, like really buy into this. Like, how do you get people to buy bonds, right? So a bond is a way for the government to like raise money in order to pay for the war. You get people to sort of say, okay, I'll buy this $50 bond. Now the government gets the $50 right now. Your bond will then increase in value over time. So then in 20 years, that $50 will become, $200. So, but how do I get people to care? How do I get them invested? I need to paint a bad guy, and I need to paint a thing that we're fighting for, right? So just like this, right? Like, this is a perfect example of propaganda. And then, of course, we have women's roles in World War I is more than in any other time, right? They really do play a role in the war. Not yet as soldiers, not on the front lines, but in a lot of different aspects, especially at home, like in the US, in any of the countries, like working in factories, filling in those gaps where men are off fighting. Yeah, so Kevin, mania, this is an awesome one. Like, mania, same thing, right? And what you notice is that in World War II, if you use mania, that A can become Adolf. So it works just the same. Just really good ways to memorize the causes. So either main or mania works well. All right, so total war, everyone's involved. It's a whole big mess. The actual war itself is mostly a stalemate, which means that you really just have the two up against each other and nobody's moving one way or the other, right? They're just sort of locked in, dug into the trenches, right? This idea of trench warfare, this has never happened before, because you have this old way of fighting where it's like, like in movies when they just sort of run up to each other and fight. It's kind of like that. Like, this is the mentality they go into with that, of like, we're at war. We're going to meet at this point and fight. But there's all this new technology that is ruining that, right? And we'll talk about the new tech in a second. But, if we're up against each other like that, a machine gun is not going to work, right? So this is really like fighting a war with old strategies, except using new technology. And so this is why they're really stuck. So they have this, no man's land is like the middle part where you can't go there because it's too dangerous. And a lot of new issues come up because of this, because you're stuck in the trenches for, months at a time. And so all kinds of like pretty gross medical issues. This was not this was no way like a glorious war. Not, it's pretty like, it's a mess. Okay, so some of the new technologies, and we'll talk more about the technology when we do Key Concept 6.1, but just like really quick, there's a whole lot of new tech that just like really throws it all out, of like how it used to be. Machine guns, where, instead of firing one shot, now you're firing hundreds of shots within seconds. I mean, totally changes it. That's why the trenches were so horrible, because as soon as you'd come out of the trench, there's just like hailstorms of bullets. And so how do you make any movement? Poisonous gas, right? Just like chemical warfare. Airplanes in war, this had never been done before. Submarines, tanks, complete game changer in how war is fought. All right. All right, so to wrap up World War I, right? So like I said, we literally did World War I in like 20 minutes. So the war ends. Okay, so the war ends, and mostly because a lot of the reason why it ends is because the US gets involved. So, in APUSH, you'll learn a lot more about the whole back and forth around the US getting involved. But instead, here it's a lot more about like, just like that the actual diplomatic process at the end. So you have the US gets into the war in 1917. They're only in it for like a year. And basically because everyone had just been locked in and stuck for so long, this new influx of, a whole country that had time to mobilize, new resources, new soldiers, new people, new ideas and how to fight this, they're able to like turn, the tide turns. And so by the end of the war, these are the four leaders of the Allies, right? So Russia had already left from the war, right? So the Bolshevik Revolution happens and they exit the war. So they're not part of this, even though they did fight alongside of them. They've already exited. So you've got these four guys and they're in charge of figuring out now what, right? We just fought this whole destructive war. It's a big mess. We've totally tanked these economies. We've ruined land forever. Like there's still land that has never been repaired because of this. And we got to make sure we prevent this from happening again, right? Like, what do we do? How do we handle this? So you basically have four different viewpoints. David Lloyd George from Great Britain, he's just kind of worried about the spread of communism. Because if communism spreads from Russia to Germany, then it could get to Great Britain. He's not thrilled with what Germany has done. He's not, he's obviously wants to prevent this, but he's mostly just trying to like kind of stop any sort of spread. So how do we contain things? Orlando from Italy, he's not really a big part of this at all. He actually leaves early and Mussolini comes to power. Based on the fact that what Orlando does here is like non-essential. He doesn't do anything to like fight for Italy. So he's just kind of like, hope it goes well. That's the best way to kind of describe him. Then you have Woodrow Wilson from the US, and he's like, we can't let this happen again, right? Like, we got to make sure that like peace exists. We need to set up some systems. We need to make sure that we treat everyone in a way that we can prevent future wars. And then Clemenceau from France is pissed because most of the war was fought in his country. And so he's coming in hot, right? So he's like, I'm not letting Germany down for anything. This is not going to happen. This can't happen, right? So he wants to make sure that Germany pays for what they've done. So it's like the best way to kind of explain the big four and what they each thought. And so the treaty itself is, a whole mess of things. And it really becomes a cause of World War II. But basically you have Germany is really like given a harsh treatment. So just like Clemenceau wanted, right? And some of the stuff that Wilson wanted is in there to keep peace. So they all kind of compromise on things, but it's really harsh against Germany Their army becomes limited to 100,000. They lose land. There's changes in borders that changes the whole way that it's set up. They are literally forced to take all the blame. There's a clause in the Treaty of Versailles that says this was all Germany's fault. But of course, like, you know, now from looking at all the causes, looking how complicated it is, just how, you know, it's not so straightforward of like that it was Germany's fault. We could argue back and forth all day, like, whose fault is this? So Germany takes all the blame here. They also have to pay reparations. They have to pay a lot of money to the Allies, and they don't have that kind of money. So they end up having to borrow a lot of it. And then finally, the League of Nations is formed in order to keep the peace. We got to have a better way of mediating. We can't just go to war every time we fight. So that's pretty much, you know, let's see. All right, so that's that's pretty much your World War I in a nutshell. I think I have one more thing in here about the Treaty of Versailles, so you can just see the like changes in borders. You know, all these new countries in red. All right, so let me just go through. It looks like you guys are doing a really good job at answering each other's questions in there. So I'll talk about fascism after. Lots of questions about fascism. Most of these. Why did people want the Archduke killed? It just has to do with this, like Serbia is part of the Austria-Hungarian Empire, and they want to be independent, and so they are, you know, attacking the country, right? They want to like assert their dominance. So it has less to do with like that specific guy and more to do with the role he played. Go back to that. This question, how come during wars we always focus on the death toll of Americans? Because people just care about themselves. Same thing happens everywhere, right? So like, we should focus on bigger numbers, of course, but when you're learning like American history or you're in America, it's Americanized, right? We see things from an American lens. But yeah, good question. Okay, World War II. This question about the Tsar, the Kaiser, the King of England, I don't even really know. I don't think that had played any role in it. I mean, maybe. It's way more in depth than what you need to know for AP World, so I didn't even know. I'm gonna skip that one for now. Just trying to see, like, all right. Okay. All right, so quick bridge, and then we'll jump into World War II. And so the thing is, like, the causes for both wars are so similar that we don't need to go through all the causes again in depth, you know, like for World War II. But let's just talk really quick about the in-between. And we'll go back to this too when we talk about we'll do a little bit more of like the isms and like fascism, communism, socialism, all the different things like that. But just a little, you know, quick blip in here, and this is just like European focused. Meanwhile, you also have like Japan becoming an imperial power, you know, attacking China, and we'll kind of like talk a little bit about that. But in Germany, so you know, you have Germany who is, you know, having to pay all this money and being given the blame for this. You also have a Great Depression that's happening. So this is by the end of the 1920s. The stock market in the US tanks, but this is global now because everyone's borrowing money from everyone. And so when one economy tanks, the rest of them are going to as well, because now they're so interconnected. And this is exactly what happens. And so what Germany experiences more than any other country is hyperinflation. So the value of one mark, of one, you know, dollar is like it changes overnight. So let's say it used to cost in 1922 100 marks, 10 marks to buy a loaf of bread. 10 marks. Now, because 1 mark is now worth 5 marks, the loaf of bread is going to cost, you know, 50 marks. I'm probably confusing you. But basically you have, if you have 100 marks in your bank account, you could have bought, 100 loaves of bread in 1922. By 1923, the cost of a loaf of bread is now 10 marks. So now you can only buy 10. And then overnight again, it's going to triple, double, again. And like, look, it goes all the way up to like trillions of marks. So by the time, at a certain point, it was cheaper for people to just use their money to put up as wallpaper than to go buy wallpaper. The mark itself was worth less than buying wallpaper. So this is a massive... So this isn't stagflation. This is just like hyperinflation. So, right. So the dollar becomes completely worthless, right? Like you can't do anything with it. Now I need a bunch of it. So you would see people like going to the shops, going to the markets with like wheelbarrows full of marks because if I'm going to buy a loaf of bread instead of one, now I need 1 million. How are you going to do that? Right. So yeah, exactly. Thank you, Talia. So this is like, basically your money was more valuable as paper, as wallpaper or burning it for fuel than it was to buy things, right? It's bad, right? How do you survive? How we just say we had a life savings, and now this life savings is basically shot because it's worthless, right? Maybe we've been saving forever and we have millions of marks, and now it's worth a loaf of bread. So in comes, Hitler is taking advantage of just all of these things, right? This economic frustration, this humiliation from World War I, right? This like frustration of like, how could we have signed this Treaty of Versailles, this treaty that took our borders away, changed our land, took our colonies away, right? It made us like the scapegoat of the world in terms of World War I. And so it's like, think about it, he kind of, this is how he comes to power. And I mean, I could do an entire session on just like Hitler and how he rises to power and how complicated it is, and the different ways, but he's elected. Like he's straight up elected to office. He doesn't overthrow anyone. It's not a coup or anything. He is elected by a vote into power. And then starts to consolidate power, starts to, rip up the way that things were done, rip up the Constitution, rip up all the things that had existed until finally he's the last one in power. So by 1933, he is in charge of all of Germany, of the entire government, in a position that was for life, right? He's like the Führer. So, a couple causes of World War II. Like, how does this kind of play out? World War I is a cause of World War II, right? So just like we just looked at, you have these high reparations, new boundaries, war guilt, all of these things are feeding into, just really feeding into the next World War to happen. It was just a matter of time, right? People are pissed and things are going to pop off anytime now. You also have basically like a failure of diplomacy, right? You have alliances just like before that are going to cause the same problems. Appeasement. This is where, Hitler starts to take over land, and instead of stopping him, they kind of are like, well, like maybe if we let him take this amount, then he'll stop. And Hitler's like, yeah, totally. Give me that amount and then I'll stop. And then he doesn't agree to that at all, right? He goes back on all of the deals. And then America staying neutral doesn't help. If they had gotten involved earlier, maybe the war wouldn't have lasted so long. Who knows? You have depression, the global depression. You have people who just want peace at any cost. So it's like, whatever it'll take, we got to get there. And then, of course, Japan, which we haven't talked about yet, but just this imperial aggression, this extreme nationalism, and the way that they are with the treaties. With, the Treaty of Versailles, it's gone, right? The League of Nations, they are not able to stop any of this. Japan invades Manchuria. Germany invades, just takes land, just as like, now this is ours. And none of it is able to stop it. So even though you have, let's see. Okay, I'm going to put these in as questions. This is questions. Even though you have, like you had the hope of being able to stop anything like this in the future, it doesn't work because none of them were strong enough, right? The League of Nations wasn't strong enough. The Treaty of Versailles wasn't strong enough, and none of it was. And so Germany and Japan just keep inching. If we go this far, will they tell us to stop? If we go this far, will they stop us? If we go this far, until eventually they're like, screw it, there's no rules. And so they just kind of go off from that. All right, so I'm moving your questions into there. I will get to them, I promise. All right, so let's just we're going to go through, overviews. I know a lot of you guys aren't on World War II yet, but I want to include this stuff here because it's so related to World War I. And we'll talk about parts of the war again when we do the Cold War in a couple weeks. So basically the war in Europe is all about Nazi expansion. Like you can see in this image, they just expand. They have almost the entire continent. And then starting in 1943, after their defeat in Stalingrad, basically their mistake is attacking the Soviet Union. So after they're defeated at Stalingrad, then you just start to get the whole empire retracting until eventually the Allies get to Berlin. That's basically all of World War II in a nutshell. Right, the U.S. joins in 1941 after Pearl Harbor. D-Day in 1944 is an even bigger turning point, right? So this is where you have the U.S. and the Allies coming in through France to come through to get to Berlin. Whoops. All right, here we go. That's the picture for D-Day. Saving Private Ryan is a really good movie that shows that first chunk, the very beginning of that movie about D-Day is really intense and a really good look at that. And that is just kind of the beginning of the end of the war. And then, of course, we can't talk about World War II without talking about the Holocaust. This did actually come up as a short answer question last year on the exam. But during the Holocaust, 11 million people are murdered specifically related to the Holocaust. So, of course, we talk about the 6 million Jews who lost their lives in this, but there are several other millions of people who were targeted because they were from Poland, or they were communist, or some sort of political dissident, or they were gay, or disabled, or gypsy, or any, really just any person who was an other, right? Sometimes people were targeted for just, what they knew, or who they knew, or what they said. Really, if you were not the picture perfect, Aryan that the Nazis idolized, then you were targeted. And it was a very complex and strategic attack on these people, right? And that's what makes it so different. It's not just. It's really, there are specific steps that are gone through of people being targeted, of them being kind of pushed out of society more and more, being removed from schools, being removed from daily life, and then eventually into ghettos where they were then physically removed from society, and then finally into extermination camps like Auschwitz. This is a picture I took a couple years ago. I traveled to Poland and went to visit it. It's a really intense place to visit, and it was, it's just really intense. It was. I went to a couple of different camps. There were other ones that were, I don't know, they felt darker. They felt almost I don't want to say haunted. I'm not sure, but just a really heavy feeling. Being at Auschwitz was really bizarre. It felt it felt really weird because it was weirdly pretty. I don't even know how to say it. It was a really weird experience. I don't know. There was maybe it was just the weather that day. I don't know, but it felt a lot different. And I mean, maybe you guys have been there before, or one of these places. It's a very intense place. So, I'll just leave it at that. But most of the camps, of Auschwitz was destroyed at the end of the war, in an effort to cover up everything that had happened. So, today it's kind of just an open field, some of it, and there are still like remnants of things. Okay. All right. So meanwhile, the thing about World War II is you've got all the stuff going on in Europe, and then you also have all the stuff going on in Asia. And just like World War I, everyone's included because colonies, right? So in Asia, it's really all about Japan, right? It's the expansion of Japan. They're moving they go to Manchuria, up in this area up here in Manchuria. Then they hit China and Korea, and they get into Indochina, Vietnam, Thailand, all these places. And they just keep going. Indonesia, all the Pacific Islands. So everywhere in that image that's red it had been taken over by Japan. So because Japan just kept going, just like Hitler, same thing, right? The expansion, that like imperial expansion, maybe their mistake is then attacking Pearl Harbor, right? So they attack Pearl Harbor, the US joins, and then basically just does this like island hopping where they go from island to island to island, liberating the island, pushing the Japanese back further and further and further and further until eventually they are in Japan. And then the decision to drop the atomic bomb is made by President Truman. And essentially it's like this complicated decision where you're like, do we do a full scale, invasion of Japan? So at this point, the war in Europe was like over for like 2 months. Now we can move all of our troops over and focus on Japan. Do we just go full force, 1 million troops get in there, which is going to cost a lot of lives, or we have this bomb, do we use it? So the decision is made to drop 2 bombs, 1 bomb, then they don't surrender, another bomb, and then finally Japan surrenders. So that surrender happens in 1945, August of 1945. All right, so a little aftermath of World War II. These next couple slides are all just like a little bit more of general aftermath. So someone said, like, why did we just talk about American lives lost? So, here you go. This is interesting. You can see in this column, it says like the actual number of deaths. But what this is showing is actually a percentage of each country's population. And why this is so interesting is like a country like Poland, they lost 6 million people, but it was over 17% of their country was killed. And so, even though 6 million isn't the most on this list, it is the most in relation to the other parts of the country. The Soviet Union loses the most by far, like 25 million compared to anyone else. But they're a big country, right? And so it's just kind of interesting to look at it like this. You also just have like complete destruction of cities. This is Warsaw, 1945, Hiroshima in Japan, Stalingrad in Russia, just leveled, just completely leveled. And like everything is rebuilt. So if you go to Europe today and you see any building that looks old, more likely than not, it's not actually old. It was rebuilt in like the 50s to look like it used to look. You see this in a lot of cities in Germany, in Poland, just across the place, So, yeah. So I mean, so one of the consequences of World War II is just the sheer destruction that occurred. Another cause is, yeah, it does. Another cause is another consequence is the United Nations. So after the war, the UN begins. And so like you can kind of see this timeline. It's kind of taking you through the rest of the 20th century. But, today, almost every single country is in the United Nations. Whereas like all the way back in, right after 1945, you can see it kind of beginning. And now you have something that's stronger than the League of Nations. So it's going to last, like it's still going. And countries are still joining, and we're, you can see like each country still, joining it. And this is potentially the reason why we haven't had another world war. Who knows, like why we haven't. But what's fascinating is that since World War II, even though there have obviously been conflicts, it's actually been one of the most peaceful times in all of history. And so, maybe we needed the devastation of World War II to really get everyone to figure out, how do we stop this from ever happening again? Oh, and then of course, like with the atomic bomb, you can't do it again. And we'll go all into that in the Cold War. But if we have another world war, people have nuclear weapons. And so this destruction doesn't even cut it compared to what it would look like in a nuclear war. Another aftermath of World War II, this is so on the left, this is where you see the percent of Jewish populations that had been killed in World War II. So the Jewish populations of Europe are just completely decimated, right? So obviously in Germany and Poland, 80 to 90% of Jewish communities were killed. And, every other region, like in Russia over here and like the Baltics. So as part of this aftermath, you do get the Jewish state, right, of Israel. And so with that, and we'll go into this more as well, but with that, and these maps of Israel are just showing 1 year of changes, right? Where you have, this is what Israel was originally supposed to be, where you have a Jewish state and an Arab state. And then you have immediately a war as soon as Israel is independent. And so from that war, Israel regains a lot of territory. A lot of that Arab territory becomes Israel, right? So you see all these people invading, and then they win that war, so they're able to push them back. So plenty of times since World War II, and obviously today, what is happening in Israel and Palestine is incredibly complicated, incredibly ingrained into the complexities of the Middle East. And this is coming out of World War II. And so this is really like the kind of the beginning of that. And then finally is just the end of imperialism, right? So this is basically showing countries in Africa becoming independent. So as soon as World War II ends, this is where independence movements just happen all over the place. Part of that is that the countries of Europe could no longer afford to keep their colonies. Right? Great Britain is devastated after World War II. They had been bombed like crazy. They spent a lot of money. They lost a lot of people. They can't afford to keep India anymore. So India becomes independent. It's the same with all these different countries in Africa. France pulls out of all their places. Germany had already lost their colonies. Any other Portuguese, Spanish, Dutch, any of the other European countries, just the same thing. They gotta focus on themselves. So you really do see this. This is a massive shift, and we'll go way into decolonization in another session, which is only for decolonization. So I'm gonna click out of the slides, but you can still download. You can download them, right? So if you click that button, you can follow along with the slides. You can they're yours. You can have them. I think it's useful to to have you have them while we're live, and so that's something that we're looking at changing. All right, so let's get into some of these questions. So if you guys can do me a favor and go into the question parking lot right now and go upvote some of the questions, just so that I can do a couple of them that are the most requested questions. It looks like this one's going up and up and up and up. Yeah, good point. None of these African borders make any sense. Not at all. They're all just completely arbitrary based on, the what the Europeans saw fit. We'll be giving us slides in the future, possibly. So we're trying to figure out how to reorganize some of the ways that this works. Okay, what are the differences between Japanese, German, and Italian expressions of fascism? So they are very similar. Yeah, Dylan does a good job answering this. So they're very similar. They have that, that leader that comes into play. They are very much like, riling people up against that common enemy, right? There's scapegoats in each one. They even have like, and I wouldn't really, I wouldn't really classify Japan as like a fascist country. They're, I guess, um, but it's a little bit more complicated in Japan. But in Germany and Italy, they both have these like paratrooper like soldiers that are like, they're like bodyguards, they're even like the brown shirts versus the what is it, the black shirts, something like that. They're even called similar things. Very much like controlling, information, controlling what people do, how they think, what they're allowed to say, being about expansion and being about reclaiming territory that was once lost. Very, very, very similar. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't even know what exactly to say is the difference between them. You wouldn't be asked to compare these things on a test. Too similar. All right. If the US had joined the League of Nations, how would this affected World War II? This is a really good question. I think these like what if questions, they make history seem less, like inevitable, things didn't happen because they were going to happen. And just like now they don't either, right? Like anything could happen. It's really a series of decisions. And I think like it's possible that the League of Nations with the US in it could have been strong enough. Maybe. I think ultimately the League of Nations was missing things that just the US being in it wouldn't have solved. So, for example, like the UN has its own like military unit. The what are they called? The UN what are they called? Blue I don't know if anyone knows what they're called. I can't think of what their name is, but they have, there is their own like units, and they're, independent from any other country. And the League of Nations didn't have that. Blue helmets. Thank you. They are, they're not part of that. And so the League of Nations didn't have that. And so was there a way to stop Hitler? Was there a way to stop Japan? Maybe, right? Like maybe in some way that there could have been, but we really don't know. If you really want to go dive into like an alternative history type thing, highly recommend what is it called? The Man in the High Castle on Amazon. Super interesting of like, what if Germany had won the war and Japan had won the war? What would it all have looked like? Super interesting. Okay. What is fascism? Okay, so fascism is a political ideology that really like bleeds into economics as well. And essentially it's an incredibly like totalitarian ideology, right? I always get this confused. Is it far left or far right? I know you guys will know this better than I will. I always get it confused with communism. It's on the complete opposite end of communism. But fascism is right. Thank you. Communism is far left. Thank you. I don't know why. It's one of those things that like always get confused. So, okay, so you have fascism on the right that is going to be, it's all about just like one party rule, one, stronghold on all aspects of the economy, on everything, right? There's no expression, there's no religion. Actually, fascism doesn't really care about religion. Communism would say like there is no religion because you should only care about the government, right? You don't need to believe in anything else, just believe in the government. Whereas fascism is much more kind of like permeating between, just all aspects of our life, right? Every single thing that we do. All right. So this question, I'll like leave this as answering. So yeah, for sure. So in terms of the political spectrum, you have, you can basically think of all of politics as, actually, let me click done answering here. And then let me just mark this question. Okay. So what do I mean by far right, far left? So politics kind of aligns on, yeah, so there's a good link. So think of it as like a line, and you have super extremism on both ends, right? And it can be, it's a difference in like almost like conservatism versus liberalism, right? More like wanting change or wanting things to stay the same. Who should be in charge? How much power should they have? All those different questions can be answered in different ways. And so the left would be more about like collective society, right? So like things that are, you know, either the government, you have like socialism would be like on the left, and then communism would be a little further, right? So with socialism, you have, like the government is providing for the people in different ways, in all types of aspects of like education and healthcare and jobs and just like wages, all those different things. Whereas on the right, it's much more like less government support, less government control, more like free market stuff, just kind of like government stay out of it. But like way on the right then would be fascism, which is more like militaristic, right? It's all about just like, it's pretty intense, right? So it's like, you have, the need to expand and attack others. You have one person in charge and that's it. There's no other parties. They control every aspect of things. Kind of complicated. So, that's kind of a brief rundown. It looks a lot different too in different countries. Like, it's not kind of a one size fits all thing. What we see in this country right now as, moderate, as progressive, as conservative, would look a lot different in another country. Like even like a Canadian or a Brit, they might, on our political spectrum fit someplace else than what it would be considered in theirs. Because it's all about like, if you think of moderate as just the middle, it's like, you having a middle depends on what it actually looks like on the other sides. And so our version of moderate looks different than what it does in other countries. And it even looks different now than what it did 10 years ago, 50 years ago. So it's always in flux. It's always changing. It's very much like political spectrum is just in context with the country that you're in and the time that you're in. It's the best way I can describe it. All right, so I'm gonna do a few more. Okay. Some of these are a little bit more about a push. They're like really good questions, like about the internment camps, things like that. But I do want to like stay focused on what you'll be asked about with, the world war. So this question: have the world wars been asked about for any essay questions in recent year? Yes, in some ways, right? So we've seen, like Dylan said, there was on the LEQ last year, there was one question that you could tie in the world wars. There was also a short answer question that talked about violence committed by totalitarian regimes, in which case you would have just talked about, the Holocaust or any of the atrocities in World War II. There was a question a long time ago. What was it? The exam was a lot different then. So it's not the exact same in the way that they categorize the questions, but it was basically like a CCOT about after World War I in the Middle East. So it was basically like ways that some of the like places in the Middle East changed after World War I and ways that they stayed the same. It was a really confusingly worded question, but it did come up once. Other than that, I haven't seen them in a little while. I think, these are topics that are kind of like ripe for a question, right? DBQ wise, I'm trying to think. There was a DBQ about the flu that happened after World War I. So you would have needed to know about World War I for like context. But it wasn't like the DBQ itself was just about the like responses to the Spanish flu. Trying to think. I don't think there was too many other things. A lot of times the world wars will come up because you like need them to answer it, but not necessarily like is the basis of the question. I don't know. I mean, we could totally see a question about one of the world wars this year because it hasn't happened in a little while. I wouldn't be surprised. Imperialism. Yeah. I mean, listen, we could go all day making guesses on like what the things will be about. And like, I love doing that. Like, I want to make predictions. I want to talk about it for sure. Just so that everyone knows. Nobody knows what the question is. So there's really no way to know. You could go through and, like if you look on the Fiveable site in resources, we've pulled like all of the questions that have ever been asked and sorted them by unit so that you can practice them. And so, with that, you can kind of see like what's missing. And so that's one way that you can kind of guess, right? Like they're not going to ask the exact same question twice. But they also do like they've asked about trade a lot. And so, who knows? Maybe they ask about trade again. Who knows? There's no way to guess what they do. Who knows? Yeah, like if you're trying to guess what College Board is thinking, good luck. Because I don't know. All right. Okay. Actually, was World War II essential for getting out of the Great Depression? Yes. This is pretty much what did it. Right. So this is more US history too, but even globally, the mobilization for World War II, that's what like contributed to just like the rise of, better economies, more jobs, fixing all those things. So yes. Okay. So yeah, it looks like you guys have answered a lot of these questions. I'll do this one. All right, so let's just do this last one, and then I'll look through them and just like type out some answers after. So, how would you suggest we prepare for the AP World History exam? Also, is the Kaplan prep book useful if you want to do well on the exam? So, this is the time where you gotta like kick it into high gear. You really gotta like sit and. Like my recommendation, and maybe you got this email from me on Friday. Well, I'm going to send out more tips like this weekend. It's like, you got to get yourself organized first, right? Like get all your stuff. Maybe you've been super organized all year, to which case like you're on top of things and that's awesome. But like take some time now, sometime this week and just like get all your things together. Get all your documents, all your, handouts and notes and all that stuff together and put them in order. And then go back through them and make notes of like tests that you didn't do very well in, essays that you didn't do very well in, notes that you don't even remember. Just like get a Post-it and kind of make yourself a note of like, all right, I gotta go back on this. Yeah, so like get yourself organized. The next thing you got to do is you got to start planning out a calendar, right? So there's 6 time periods in AP World. You can combine 1 and 2. Right, so that everything is now equal. And so you think about like now that means you have 5 buckets of things to study. Periods 1 and 2, and then 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you take from now until the exam, it's like 60 something days. And so then you just got to do some division, divide it out and make a little calendar for yourself and figure out, okay, I need to cover everything. So that means I get this many days and I'm going to cover that unit in this time. And then I'm going to move on, right? And that would be the best way to do this. Yeah, don't plan to finish on May 16th. Start, subtract a few days, right? So figure out between now and like May, 12th, how many days can you spend on each unit? And then make a calendar and start plugging things in, right? All right, perfect. So about 6 to 8 days a period. So, it's like a week. So now start plugging things in. Okay, so what do I like to do? Can I watch videos? Can I get a prep book? Maybe get Kaplan. or get there's a bunch of them. They're like ASAP one, AMSCO, all of them are super good. So no, don't spend 8 days on period 1. Combine 1 and 2, right? So spend the same amount of time that you would spend on period 3 on periods 1 and 2. So just combine them. And then just start planning things. I want to read this prep book, so I'm going to read a little bit every day to make sure I get the whole thing done. I want to take a practice test. Maybe you want to watch replays, right? So we'll plug 5 Plus a little bit here. If you're not yet a member, you could become a member and you could go back through and rewatch some of those sessions, go through the slides, play trivia games, things like that. And that will help you out. But get yourself organized, make yourself a calendar, and then start plugging things in. And honestly, just rip the Band-Aid. I know you're nervous. I know you're like, I don't want to even start studying. Trust me, I get it. I keep putting things off that I'm supposed to be doing too. But the longer you wait, the worse it gets, right? The more you're going to wish that you started earlier. So think about your future self. Think about yourself on May 16th. You want to wake up and be like, I got this. I'm so ready for this test. You don't want to be wishing that you had more time. Yeah. So you want to be ready, you want to be feeling good about it, and now's the time to get yourself organized, make a plan, make a realistic plan. You don't need to read a chapter a day or anything. You will if you wait. But right now you can just do a little bit every day. This question about, is the member fee annual or just one time? So it's annual, so it's for this year, but you don't get recharged every year. It's not like an automatic renewal. It's just it's $25 right now because you can use the code for $10 off for the rest of the school year. All right. And yeah, I'll probably record a video again this year of pep talk. So that's what I'm here for. So if you just need Monday night pep talks, then make sure you sign up for next week. Next week we'll talk about, I don't even remember. I think it was, what does it say next to it? Is it science and technology? I'm all over the place. Yeah. So next week we'll talk about science and tech. I'm going to help you walk through it. I'm also going to just make sure that we are really focused on what's going to be on the exam. And then on Thursday nights, we're going to start doing practice essays together. So we'll write an essay together. We'll show you how to do it. We'll show you what we think about, with a student like Dylan. I'll come in and help sometimes too, of when I see this, how do I think about this prompt? How do I break it down? How do I approach it? And what's the best way to write it for AP World, So we'll do more stuff like that. And those sessions, of course, are free while they're live. If you want to rewatch them, then those will be something that will be 5 Plus. So with that said, I want to really shout you guys all out for sticking around. I know this is a lot. We just did 60 minutes worth of a whole lot. But I think this is really helpful. I think you guys are really going to kill it, and I can't wait for you to do that. So, 73 minutes now. Yeah, seriously. Let me copy that. Jillian, you're going to be on our website now. All right. So do me a favor in the chat. Give me a 1 through 5 how you're feeling right now about AP World. 5 would be I got this. I'm going to be killing it on exam day. A 1 would be I don't even know what AP World is. So 1 through 5 in the chat, and be honest with yourself, right? So it's okay to be I got this. I want you to feel confident. I want you to feel confident about being confident. That's meta. All right, cool. So you guys are good. Dylan's flaunting his 5. If you're feeling a 3 or 4 right now, you're in a great spot. Thought this was 0. It's all the same, right? And also if you're in 5 Plus, for example, the Russian Revolution, Tom Ritchie covered that last week for AP Euro, but that's super useful for AP World, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. And so that's something that you could like go back and rewatch from another subject that could be really useful. I don't have music theory yet, but later. All right, y'all, I'm out. I'm gonna head out and I don't know, get back to work, I guess. Cool. All right, I'll see you guys later. Enjoy the slides, and we'll talk to you guys another time on Thursday. I will send out an email about Thursday. We're gonna do a period 5 review on Thursday. Yeah, buddy.